Hi guys, and welcome to Guild Wars 2 Daily. I had a lot of really good questions last episode, and the episode before that as well. We've had some really good questions coming in. If it keeps up, I'm really starting to get quite a backlog of things I want to talk about. So if this keeps up, I could end up doing 4 questions a day. Let me know what you think about that. But yeah, let's get started. The footage in the background for today comes in from GwOnline. We haven't seen much of their stuff for a while, so we'll be using that. First question had a lot of thumbs up and comes in from 1000 May Fall, who asks, do you think that the integrity of the guild system is hurt by the fact that one can be a part of many guilds? Doesn't that in essence make everyone a merc? Also, won't those who are only a part of one look down upon those who are a part of more as unfaithful when they choose to play with friends from the other guild? Also, and more importantly, do you think we'll be able to organise guilds beforehand or reserve names, not from Guild Wars 2? To your more importantly section at the end, no, there's no real way to do this at the moment. I think there were talks a long time ago that we could possibly reserve guild names in a similar fashion to how we could reserve character names from Guild Wars 1. That doesn't seem to have come through, or at least I've not heard anything about that for a very long time, so I don't think you can do that anymore. Generally, you just want to make sure you get in the game nice and early and reserve those names as soon as possible, which of course does mean that those guys pre-purchasing the game and getting that 3-day head start will have an advantage in that regard, but hopefully there won't be too much of a problem. I've never really found there to be such a mad rush for guild names as there is for character names, but yeah, it is something to consider. So if you desperately want a specific name that you think is going to be quite popular, make sure you pre-purchase, and good luck, really, is all I can offer there. But to do with guild loyalty, this was a big topic when ArenaNet first announced what they were doing here, and a lot of people, as you clearly are still questioning whether it's really a good move. Really, guilds in Guild Wars 2 aren't the same as you'd expect guilds or clans or whatever from other games to be, because they have this much more open policy. So rather than forcing players to dedicate themselves and show allegiance to just a single guild from as soon as they join it until they decide to leave, it's either you're with the guild or you're not with the guild. It's far more relaxed and open. You can actually be a part of many different guilds at the same time, and when you log on for the day, you just kind of choose which guild you want to represent. And by represent, what that means is if you're representing one specific guild, that means you're kind of appearing in their roster. It's their tag that appears next to your name. It's their chat that you're using. I believe there was talk about using chat from other guilds, even though you're not necessarily representing them at the time, but I think that was something that ArenaNet said that they're still working on. A lot of those chat features, like having your own custom tabs with specific people that you want to talk to for chat and all those kinds of things, are all still being worked on. But I think that was one of the ideas, that even if you're not representing a guild, you might still be able to chat with them, which will be quite cool. And the idea here is that they're turning the guild system more into something you might see in social media, where you have different groups of people. Essentially, their philosophy is just that everyone makes different groups of friends when they play games, right? You might first start playing Guild Wars 2, meet a few people in maybe your first dungeon or in a specific story mission, or while you're doing a certain dynamic event. You go off on a massive zerg with those guys, and then, you find out they're a part of a guild. You join the guild, and maybe for the first 2 months of your time playing Guild Wars 2, you spend all of your time with this group. But then over that time, you might have started associating with another group of people that you happen to meet somewhere else. It's definitely something that will be happening if in any MMO Guild Wars 2, because it's entirely built about being sociable and meeting people as you play around, where there's no kill stealing or anything. So it's bound to happen. You're going to meet another group of people as you're going through. With traditional guild systems in other MMOs, people are kind of discouraged at that point from spending too much time with those people, because there's going to be that moment where they say, oh, hey, do you want to join our guild? And then everyone's always forced, oh damn, what do I do? Do I want to leave the guild of people I'm already with and join these guys? Do I like these more? And everyone has to make this horrible decision where they have to leave one person to join the other. Well, with Guild Wars 2, they're simply saying, well, look, you've got more than one group of friends. Why are we forcing you to only affiliate with one? Why don't we just let you join the other groups, and during the times when you fancy playing with them, then you can just represent that guild, and when you have the times when you fancy playing with the other people, you can represent them. The whole idea is that they're trying to acknowledge that people have different groups of friends that you can go off and associate with. And they always say, when people ask this question in interviews, what does this mean for guild loyalty, that it's not a question of loyalty at all. That if anything, it's unreasonable for people to say you can only have this group of friends and no other group of friends. And they think that the community at large will appreciate that everyone has different groups. When the whole game is built around this idea that there are lots of guilds, there's not going to be so much animosity from guild leaders when someone chooses not to represent them for a day, because everyone can appreciate that even those guild leaders themselves will have multiple guilds that they could be a part of, and no one's going to be fool enough to assume that everyone in their guild is only loyal to them and only affiliates with them. I personally wouldn't want to be a part of a guild where the leader is frowning at me because I've chosen one day out of the week to go play with someone else, and I think it will be rare that that will actually come forward. There are more legitimate worries though. I mean, for example, an extra feature that's now in Guild Wars 2 that wasn't in the first game is guild storage. This is something that you see in a lot of MMOs, and now it's here in Guild Wars 2. So the guild can pull together, and then they will all have a big guild chest that they can put stuff in and take stuff out of, right? Cool feature. Then you combine that with the fact that people can essentially now hop around guilds much more freely. There is now more room in Guild Wars 2 for people to take the piss and just hop from guild to guild to guild. And I could see that. You could say, oh, right, well, this is going to be a problem. But at the end of the day, it still comes down to the guilds themselves to regulate who's joining their guilds. Just because we can be in multiple guilds, it doesn't necessarily mean that these guilds are now going to be far more loose on who they let join. If someone's clearly only come for their own benefit, they're clearly only there because they want the perks that the guild's offering, they're not contributing anything, they're just taking all the items, then they'll get kicked out. Nothing should really change in that regard. I think guild loyalty's a funny one. I think people will be loyal to whatever guild they're having fun with. If the guild as a whole is doing a lot of events, they're organising things to go out and do, they're always very willing to help their members, they're providing lots of perks like the experience bonuses and stuff, then people will continue to play with them. I'll probably have a main guild like that that's very active and has got a lot of friends that I know and will be playing there most of the time, but then I might have another guild with a couple of my brothers in it and maybe some other members of my family that are going to be playing the game as well. Am I really not allowed to have that so that one day out of the week when we play together we've got something to identify as our group? I really don't think that it's going to change the face of the way guilds work too much. There will still be guild loyalty. It's just that now people can be more picky about what guild they're loyal to, I suppose. And as I said, I personally probably won't be loyal to any guild if they required me to only identify with their group as one, because that's not the way people are, and I think that's all ArenaNet are trying to appreciate there. It might be a bit harder on guild leaders, but at the end of the day, they're the ones that want the guild, and they're going to have to prove to their members that there's something they're staying for, as within any other MMO. Quick question for today comes in from RFC3514, who says, is there any persistent logic to the order in which weapon skills appear on the bar? In other words, is the first skill always single target, and the second always AoE, and the third always a dot, etc.? I realise different weapons have different abilities, but have you been able to detect any sort of logic to their order? If not, is it possible to reorder them from weapon to weapon combination? That would make it much easier to remember which button does what. Yeah, there is some logic there, and in one way, there is kind of a way to reorder them as well, if you wish. The weapon skills, it's pretty much based on recharge, and that can even be said about all 10 skills in your bar. So just looking at the left 5, right? The first skill is essentially your auto attack. A while ago, Guild Wars 2 was kind of saying, oh, we have no auto attacking, there's no auto attack in Guild Wars 2, it's all skill based. Well, really, skill 1 is your auto attack. It's different for each profession. All auto attacks have their own flavors, and depending on the weapon, it can also change as well. They usually like skill chains as well, your auto attack. So one auto attack will do one thing, then the next might add a different condition, and then the next might do a bigger bit of damage. But generally, that's kind of what skill 1 is. It doesn't really have a recharge. Skill 2 will typically, I can't think of any examples of any skills that don't follow this, have the shortest recharge out of what you're looking at on your bar. So they've got a recharge, but it's very, very short. Then skill 3, 4, and 5, slowly the recharges generally get longer. So in some situations, that's not 100% true. Like skill 4 might have a shorter recharge than skill 3, but generally they're ordered not just by cooldown, but by how much ArenaNet kind of guess you're going to be wanting to use the skill. So they're kind of ordered by frequency of use. So even though that skill 4 might have a shorter cooldown than the skill 3, the situations where you actually want to use it, while it's a useful skill, may still be less often than your skill 3 on the bar. So generally it's by frequency. How often are you going to be using these skills? And usually that's because of the cooldown. Skill 5 has almost universally got a huge cooldown. So for example, a fire elementalist wielding a staff, that skill 5 is a meteor shower, which has got a huge cooldown. That's the kind of thing you'll be expecting there. The other side of the bar There is logic there. It's not so much about cooldowns. All those utility skills typically have quite high cooldowns. Usually, though, the one with the least cooldown on it usually is going to be your self-heal skill, which you're going to want fairly frequently, depending on how well you're playing the game, obviously. And that comes the most leftmost slot on your skill bar over there. So that's your self-heal, and that's always there in that same slot, so you always know where it is. Very close to your health bar, obviously. I guess it's quite opportunely placed there. So there's a bit of logic there. Then you've got your 3 utility skills. They're always there in the middle, so that's kind of what's going on there. This is where you can change. If you want to actually order those 3 utility skills, then go nuts. You can put them in whatever order you possibly want. You can order them by longest recharge on the left and shortest on the right, or whatever you want. You can customize those 3, but that's about it as far as customization goes. And then your very, very rightmost skill is always your elite skill, which are massive game changers, and typically as a result of that will come with massive cooldowns. So on the whole, the bar does still follow the kind of same thing that the weapon skills alone do, which is longer cooldowns as it goes along, but that's not necessarily true. It breaks down a little bit when you get to the utility skills, but that's kind of the logic there. There is a logic there, and from when I played at the convention, it definitely felt very, very natural, and I didn't want to change it for what that's worth. I didn't want to change the order because I felt like it was in quite a nice place for me. That's how I always ordered it for Guild Wars 1, which obviously had a limited skill bar system as well. The last question for today comes in from Clownshoe, amazing name, who says, can you talk about the disadvantages, if there are any, to players that never played Guild Wars 1? What disadvantages will they have in this game? Oh, this is a good one. A lot of people ask about this, and in general, the answer is that no, you're not really going to have any disadvantages. There are certain things that you can say Guild Wars 1 players will be quicker to pick up in Guild Wars 2. For example, Guild Wars 1 players, as I just said, we are already used to having a skill system where you can only equip a limited number of skills. For Guild Wars 2 that's 10, but for Guild Wars 1 it was 8. You could only have 8 skills. A big part of Guild Wars 1 was picking the right skills to use and getting used to being in a situation where you could only use those 8. However, how important that's going to be in the long run, I've always disputed, because you can look at other MMOs, right, where you can use any skill you could possibly want at any moment. There's more skills than there are keys you could possibly bind to them, right? And you could potentially, if you wanted, use all of them. But how many do you actually use? It's not that much more. The difference between playing Guild Wars 2 or even Guild Wars 1, right, where you've got this limited skill system, and other MMOs, even though there is this limitation in place, it's not actually that different, because you don't tend to find you're using a lot of those other skills in other MMOs, because often they're quite redundant anyway. They're lower tiered versions of skills, or they're completely not relevant to whatever you're playing at that point in time. You've always got them organised in some way, and it's rarely more than 10, I find, in most games. So for Guild Wars 2, really, I mean, a lot of people will point to that with the limited skill bar system. It's probably not going to be as important as you think. Obviously, from a story side, there's going to be a lot that Guild Wars 1 players will be able to appreciate, but this isn't a game where it will come at you with some kind of a question about the lore that you can only continue through the main storyline if you get it right, and only Guild Wars 1 players would know it. It's not going to happen, right? So I wouldn't worry about it. That even in the non-starting area, there is an area where you can answer riddles. Now, ArenaNet could have designed these riddles to have been about the world of Tyria. They could have been riddles that only people who know about the lore would understand and complete, and that would have been a perfect example of some content that Guild Wars 1 players would definitely have an upper leg over. But ArenaNet seemed to have very decidedly chosen not to do that. All those riddles, anyone could answer. They're just normal, common riddles that you'd expect anywhere in the world, with nothing to do with Tyria. I think there might be one, maybe, that's got something to do with the lore, but nearly all of them, anyone could really have a crack at. So, and this is just an example of one thing where, because you can clearly see ArenaNet have made this decision with this dynamic event in question, that decision will have carried through the whole game. You're never going to be screwed over because you don't know the story. People are going to appreciate the game a lot more if they know the story of the world. If they've played Guild Wars 1, they will appreciate it a lot more. There will be so many references to Guild Wars 1 stuff that is going to put a smile on Guild Wars 1 player's face that a Guild Wars 2 player will just think, meh. And in that sense, yeah, I suppose that means that Guild Wars 1 players will get more out of the game because they'll probably have a little bit more fun, but that has nothing to do with your ability to complete content. It's never going to be so bad that someone's going to not choose you for a dungeon or in a PvP team because you didn't play the first game. It's not going to happen. It's a farcical concept. I wouldn't worry about it. The other thing in combination with this people always ask about is the Hall of Monuments. So if you don't know, if you've been living under a rock, Guild Wars 1 players, if they've completed certain challenges and got certain titles in the first game, they can dedicate them at this place called the Hall of Monuments, which then unlocks rewards for them come the second game. Now, this can include things like gear, it will include weapons and armor and so forth, but it strikes me that this is all going to be scaled to the level that your character receives it at. So this doesn't mean you're going to get an early game bonus. You're not going to be more statistically powerful than anyone else. It's generally a cosmetic thing. These will be weapons with nice skins but stats that can be found elsewhere, and not even necessarily with stats that are greater than the stats you may have found already before you manage to get your hands on whatever you've unlocked. So that's not going to matter. If anything, the collector's edition bonuses are going to be more unbalancing and give people more of a benefit than the Hall of Monuments looks like it will, which is quite funny because the collector's edition stuff is so minor. So yeah, don't worry about it. If you've not played Guild Wars 1, you will miss out on stuff, and I do maintain that, and that's kind of why I built my channel. That's why this channel exists on YouTube, because there's so much you can get out of the second game if you know the story. But past that, gameplay wise, I would not worry about it. There's nothing that Guild Wars 1 players are going to have over Guild Wars 2 players, even though they might be more familiar with some of the concepts that have gone into Guild Wars 2. But having said that, if you think about it, Guild Wars 2, even though it's a sequel to the first game, and ArenaNet have taken some design decisions forward from their original game, it's also a fully persistent MMO, which Guild Wars 1 never was. So we could have a situation really where it's players of other normal, shall we say, MMOs coming into Guild Wars 2. They might come more comfortably into Guild Wars 2 than Guild Wars 1 players who are used to all the persistence that Guild Wars 1 had and all the quirks that went along with that. So that would turn on its head, wouldn't it, really? And it would be not Guild Wars 1 players that have such a nice transition into the game. But there you go, guys. That was Guild Wars 2 Daily. Thanks very much for watching, and thanks very much to Guild Wars Online again for the footage in the background today. Leave any questions you may have in the comments section down below, and I will see you tomorrow.